It says I'm live. It looks like this is actually going to happen. It's so late compared to how I'm normally awake. It's 11:49, and I sound like an announcer. How did this happen? This is an experiment. This is an experiment that feels like it's starting at the very end of the world. Um, and that's the situation that this is being born into. So one of the things that I absolutely love to do is I absolutely love to keep journals. And I've loved to write long before I decided that I love to read. The way that I primarily consumed information was by listening to people. So what you're doing right now, listening to me, is the primary way I absorbed information before I decided that maybe I should be looking to books to get more information about the world more quickly. And it's not that I enjoy reading. Um, I very much don't, I think, enjoy reading compared to the average person. But I do enjoy the fact that books are where you can find um, information about subjects that either cover a breadth of time that you wouldn't otherwise be able to see, or they dive so deeply into a subject that it would take an excruciatingly long time to gather all that information about the subject if it were too much for it to be any other medium. So um, why did I decide to go down that path? I decided to go down that path because this is an experiment, and it's very late, and I don't really know what I'm talking about. But this is a video journal, a vlog, I guess, if you could call it that. I don't think it really is a vlog. I think that's a particular format. This is more just me talking to myself. This is just a journaling technique um, for the purpose of primarily getting information out of my head into some format on a regular basis. Um, but also, like I said, an exchange rate of information from one place to another, a way to perhaps start the process of taking information from one place and depositing it somewhere else. It is an opportunity to serve as a conduit, wide open on both ends, as I once wrote in a journal, taking information in and spewing it back out. I try to be a conduit for information where I absorb video, audio, imagery, text, books, games, and spit it back out into journals because I like to journal. I especially like writing in journals that are not lined so that I can both draw and write because you never know what form you want something to take in the moment. But this is a way to possibly capture information in a slightly different manner. Okay, so why do this? Well, normally I think I like keeping journals because it's sort of an egotistical thing. It's an idea that these ideas are mine. I have absorbed these things. These are the things that I found throughout the universe that I think are shiny and worth keeping in my pocket, and I'm going to show them to you. It's a very egotistical collection of thoughts. These are the things that are important to me, and therefore, because they're important to me and I am important, then they're important to you. Or because they're important to me and because they're objectively important also to you, then I must be important for collecting them. That's not what this one is about. This one is um, about not missing a beat in the process of processing information. Because where I previously thought perhaps thought and writing is about eventually reaching the ultimate thought, actually what it's more about is the journey, not so much the destination. So if I'm not taking snapshots of my thought process as I go through life learning things, then there will be a lot of missing out on the places I've gone along the way. I always thought that someday I will know the truth. Someday I will have the answers. And when I do, it will be important to people. And it will be good to share those things with people. But I'm finding more and more that that I won't find the answers. And more importantly, that no one will find the answers. That the process of sharing information that we find and collect, pull together and spread apart over time is much more important than where we ultimately end up. The information that I right now have in my brain is not going to be the same information that I would feel is relevant to share at some later point. But this information still could be helpful to somebody who's looking for something. It might combine with something that's currently in someone else's head and change the shape of that information in a way that's meaningful to them and help them along their journey to discover more patterns, to do more creation and destruction and thoughts and ideas. Um, that being said, this is not meant to be a platform for taking ideas and planting them like a flag in human history to say that these ideas are important. I would hate to do that right now because more so than any other time in my life am I starting to really respect the awesome power of an idea for good and for evil. So in history, in my history, in the past, I clung to the quote, nothing in this world is as powerful as an idea whose time has come. And I thought that that meant that having an idea would draw to an individual a great deal of personal power, reverent power. Um, not sure if that's the right term or not. But if you have great ideas, then you are a great person. That was the idea. There's this concept called great man theory of history, where history is the process of individuals at certain times being a light to the world. Gee whiz. So I always looked to Ben Franklin. I was a big fan of Ben Franklin growing up because I thought that just the volume of ideas that you commit to paper, in some way will influence the quality of those ideas, or rather your impact on thought over time. I don't see Ben Franklin as being a particularly notable a thinker or philosopher or a public figure, but he did write a lot, a lot. He committed a lot of things to paper constantly, and it very prolific, and got the things that he wrote out there and combined them into journals and books and newspapers. And I always thought that that is sort of a pattern that you can follow to just create as much content as possible. A very, very, very small percentage of those things will be relevant, and you know, if you do this enough out of sheer brute force volume of content that you produce, eventually you'll make something that's worthwhile. And those one or two things will be sufficient to carry your legacy through history. Okay, again, back to ego. A lot of that was about posterity. This is not about posterity. So what is this about? This is about me dealing with a challenging concept that I am encountering in the things that I read, and that challenging concept is called pluralism. Pluralism is unlike anything that I've ever sought to understand or internalize, because it seems to fly in the face of something that I held dearly when talking about ideas, and that is that there is, for one, objective truth, and two, that it's something that is right, can be shared, can be understood, and can be a shining light, a guiding principle, something that can light the way and guide humanity forward in lockstep towards some ideal utopian scenario. Pluralism disagrees with that notion. Pluralism states that the most successful times in history have been ones where we entertain a great deal of philosophies and ideologies simultaneously from a great many different segments of the population. So a pluralist society is actually quite far from the concept of objective truth. A pluralist society might hold one belief about what's good and another belief about what's good simultaneously, when the two of these in practice might actually be in conflict. And that's healthy, and that's good, especially in a pluralist democracy where, you know, the people are leading the charge. The people are leading governing the society, and they're doing so in this pluralistic manner, where not everybody is of one mind, which is weird. It's weird because you would think in those moments, aha, This is it. We must be fundamentally changing our understanding of things that's projecting us forward to getting closer to the actual truth. But it's that state of contention and that state of lack of objective truth that actually makes society tolerable and makes society profitable and makes individuals happy and gives them material, uh, um, not pleasure, material uh, success, material enjoyment. What's the word I'm looking for? Sustenance, well-being, material well-being comes from not being in full agreement with everyone all the time, and there not being an accepted right answer for things, but rather everybody's sort of working it out. I mean, it makes sense, really. Like, I always clung to the idea of creativity, and I thought that creativity is one of those things that, well, you know, you have a box in which you're trying a box. This is a circle. You have some boundary that is the constrictions on where it is that you're trying to be creative, and that limitation provides you the opportunity to be creative because now you have a space in which only certain things are allowed, and only certain rules can be used, only certain moves can be done, only certain colors, only certain numbers of syllables, or whatever it is. You know, the constrictions breed creativity because then you can take stuff from outside and you can change what's in that circle. If you don't have that shape, that boundary, it was a square, now it's a circle, whatever. If you don't draw a boundary on something, if you don't give it constrictions, then it's very hard to be creative because everything is everything. But if you're able to say, you know, like, this is the space that we want to be creative in, then that allows you to then look outside that space and say, well, what's in here that I want to replace with something that's not currently in there? So the boundary gives you the opportunity to be creative. So it makes sense that pluralism would give you the ability to move forward. And creativity gives you innovation, and innovation gives you progress. So it would make sense that progress comes from pluralism because you're able to have multiple different ways of looking at something. At the same time, let's think something through live here. The assumption, though, is that there was some constriction, right? So even in a pluralist society, this is your center of mass. It just so happens that there are some people out here and there are some people out here. And what will happen is if we abide the people out here and we abide the people out here, then what's in the circle or what's inside the center of mass will change because we're now allowing these people to travel in and outside of that circle to exchange ideologies or technologies or material innovations, whatever you want to call them. So it's still implied that there's a center of mass, and maybe that center of mass is the historical precedent. It's the way that things are. It's the success of agriculture meeting industry. It's the success of industry meeting technology. We call it technology. Everything's technology, meaning the digital age. But whatever the status quo is, if you're allowing people to also be other things, then you're going to see disruption in that middle part. It's going to make everything better for everybody. You will, when you start to see the restrictions come in on not being able to do things differently, then you're going to reach stagnation, and pluralism is going to go away into what's the opposite of that? Not autocracy. What's the opposite? Not monoism, although, you know, like linguistically. I can't remember the right word is. But some examples of that would be a monopoly. A monopoly in a particular sector prevents deviation, and that will mean that your everything in the boundary stays the same forever, and so it's going to reach stagnation. Legislature that protects the way things are. So, like, if we make laws that protect the oil industry, then we're really reducing the pluralism, economically speaking, in that area. But it's also it's also a cultural, social thing, right? So people have the ability to believe other things, things other than other people. Um, if you lose that, that also becomes dangerous. But I don't really want to go down that path right now. That's a very different path, and I can come back and talk about a lot of these things later. I don't know yet how long these things are supposed to be. So far, I'm 15 minutes into my first whatever this is. In the future, they might be 5 minutes, 30 seconds, 20 minutes, an hour, 90 minutes. I'm not sure. But I'm having fun, and I have other things that I'd like to talk about, so I'm going to keep doing that as long as Lainey stays asleep. Um, so, what am I doing? What am I? Who am I? Here's a thing that has come up recently is I'm starting to question the nature of the neural activity that takes place inside my skull. And that's partly because of the way that media has challenged me to think about things. I had the opportunity to play a wonderful game, a terrible game, uh, a really thought-provoking, consequential game called Disco Elysium. And that really cracked an egg in my head, man. That led to a revolution inside my brain to explore so many things. Um, I think it closed the book on some stuff and opened the book on so much more. It caused me to make peace with a lot of my ongoing battle with intelligence, actually. And the institutions that enshrine it and protect it and venerate it. For the first time after playing that game, I felt like I was free to move about the territory of intelligence. Prior to that, I felt like an outsider who always had to defend myself against it, as if there was some uh, as if there was some oppression in intelligence. When it turns out intelligence is one of the few places that you can move about freely, and anyone can have from it what anyone else gets. I mean, to be fair, there are material costs, financial costs to being able to educate oneself, and that was really what I always fought against. Was I felt like I was not meant to be educated. It was a fluke, and so as a poor kid, I always hated that I was aware of that I had been given an education um, that by the normal course of events I wasn't meant to have, and I resented that in a way. I resented that these people kept a balloon, a bubble around education. But again, these are things that this experience helped me to let go of, because I learned that that learning is open to everyone, and you can go as far with it as you choose to. And I always kind of knew that, because I would say, complain about college costing so much money and yet libraries are free. And then, once I went to college, I had a certain expectation that because I went to college, life was going to be a certain way for me. And by the way, while I was in college, um, if I had a class that required me to do a lot of reading, I would not do the reading. I would find a way to pass the class, because what I was there for was I was there for the credits, because the credits gave me a degree, and the degree gave me the material success of having gone to college. So the books were not in my interest to read. What was in my interest was to find the most efficient way to pass the class. And so books had a very low value to me, and I was looking for ways to innovate and be more efficient and disruptive with the way that I took advantage of my education, which really was just an indicator of class that would open some doors for me. So I had such a tongue-in-cheek perspective on what education was that it caused all kinds of problems with how I saw the world. Now, I have no fear of picking up a book, because like I said before, a library is free, and I felt like, well, I don't have time to go to the library and read a book, because that's not going to make me any less poor, right? If I'm going to read a book, I'm going to get paid for it. If I'm going to read a book, I'm going to get paid for it. Oh, and by the way, if I'm going to get paid to read a book, then I'm going to find a way to say I read the book and still get paid anyway. I mean, it makes sense, right? It makes so much sense. But knowledge is awesome on its own also. And maybe I'm coming from a place of privilege where I now have the time in my life to not worry about where my next meal is going to come from or if I'm going to be successful, so I can devote my time to reading because it's not going to make that much of a difference whether I spend my time reading or not. uh, it's not going to make a difference if I become more successful because I read. I'm reading for the express benefit of my own understanding. And oh my gosh, what a revolution that's been. Um, so thank you, Disco Elysium. Thank you to the people who made Disco Elysium. Thank you to Pancho for introducing me to Disco Elysium. There's a whole bunch of stuff that fixed for me. Um, awesome, awesome stuff. And it also helped me pick out some books. It introduced me to some topics that allowed me to think about, oh my gosh, all of this stuff is happening at the same time. Like the convergent, what I'm learning is, a critical juncture, the convergence of economics and race and ethnicity, nationality, technology, military action, uh, companies, employees, like all of this stuff sort of happening at the same time, influencing one another and coming to critical junctures in history like the one we are right now experiencing. So hello, future human, for coming back and joining me in this moment where I talk about the moments leading up to whatever the hell's about to happen. This channel is about, this experiment, this journal is about not calling attention to myself, not claiming that my ideas are consequential, but putting myself out there to help you in your thinking, to move things along for you, to take whatever it is that's in my brain at this moment, mingle it with what's in your brain, and see if something interesting happens as a result that pushes you further in a direction. Again, I said that my hope is that this channel does not come to represent an idea, because I'm very scared right now of the prospect of putting an idea out there, because I have a great deal more reverence for the power of ideas than I did before to destroy. Humans have an interesting nature, that we experience physical reality, but then we also experience an ideological reality at the same time, because we abstract from our observation to something that we eventually arrive at called meaning. And meaning is not something that's out there. Meaning is something that's in here. And meaning can be shared. Meaning can be generated, and it can be shared. And so this is a space that we walk together. So ideas about meaning in life can be very consequential. They're common spaces, they're shared spaces. And those ideas, therefore, can become as real, because they influence, everyone who can share ideas, as the physical reality that influences people as well. So if you have an idea, and that idea becomes shared and that idea becomes internalized, then people might do something as a result of it. And the scariest one that I always point out is the idea of thou shalt not kill. That's an idea that occurred to someone. There's a lot in there, right? There's a moral judgment in there, and morality is complex, and there's responsibility in there, and responsibility is complex. It deals with the self, like to really think about the relationship between the idea of self and the idea of responsibility. Complicated stuff. But that idea, once it becomes expressed, it can be shared, and once it's shared, it can be mutually held, and when it's mutually held, it can become legalized. It can become an institution in and of itself, and when it's an institution, it needs defending, and when it needs defending, sometimes someone has to die. So would you kill for an idea like thou shalt not kill? When someone dies as a result of an idea, that idea is as real, at least, as that person was. That the idea killed them. So ideas are, creating ideas is an immense responsibility not to be taken lightly. And so it's my hope that I don't accidentally do that without intentionally, purposing myself to do so. Because, man, you got to play the long game with ideas. You got, if people can kill each other because of thou shalt not kill, then you really have to uh, be a pretty, like, you have to be a chess master to be able to implement ideas in a way that actually benefits people in the long run. I don't remember what direction I was going. I think I was trying to say that one of the things that I wanted to share is this concept of what's going on in my head, the electrochemistry of here. Descartes, he was a philosopher that was able to piece apart everything in existence, save for the existence of self. Self was the one thing that he wasn't willing to give up. I think, therefore I am. And that was supposed to be the kernel of philosophy for, I don't know. I mean, it was important when I went to school, so obviously it's got some staying power. Obviously it was pivotal. So, and then from there, I think, therefore I am. So I know I exist, and I believe in God. God exists. God is good. God is omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, and omniscient. I need some sleep. And between me, I knowing I exist, and I knowing God exists, and God is these things, I can put the rest of reality back together. So it's really interesting that those were the two. Those were the 2 points on which Descartes hung all of existence, was I exist and God exists. And you think, well, that's a lot of faith to say God exists and therefore that's why I'm putting everything back in its place for all of existence. But overlooks the amount of faith involved in I exist. There's a lot that goes on in your brain, a lot of processes, a lot of energy being exchanged by cells across pathways from one specialized mechanism to another, whirring with activity. So wherever you are, take a second, look around, and like you quickly scan your environment, think about the stuff that's in it. What kind of a room are you in? What kind of stuff is around you? What color is it? What shape is it? What purpose does it serve? What was your last interaction with that thing? You're doing a lot of heavy lifting. Visual processing, visual cognition is complex stuff. For you to be able to discern color and shape and assign meaning and understand what the things are around you and what their meaning is. I mean, you're necessarily, if there's any letters or words around you, you've probably processed those involuntarily. If there was a threat in your environment, if there was something moving that caught your attention, you understood what that thing was and what its relationship to you was and what it was doing, and you started to make some assumptions about not just what it was doing at the moment that you observed it, but also where it came from, where it was going, what that process was all about. Like, visual cognition is intense. So there's stimuli coming in to your senses that's being received by some mechanism. So now you have stimuli that has been received, and you have to perceive it. So the process of converting it into from whatever format in which it's received, wavelengths, into whatever that cell type spits out on the other side, it has to be broken down. So what are all the different steps of this? I don't even remember. But it is a process of signified and signifier. So light that reaches your eyes is an actual phenomenon, but when it reaches the cells and it's processed, a certain signal is sent out from that cell that symbolizes, that signifies what light activity it received. And so that then has to be converted into something that's perception, not just reception, but perception. So you, oh gosh, I'm too tired to go through the whole process, but you would scan it for features, you would scan it for behaviors, you would compare. Oh yeah, you have to put it into memory. You have to store it. So you have to convert it from whatever format you receive to some sort of storage. And then you have to be able to compare frame by frame, if you would, what the differences were, what patterns are. Like looking for patterns. That's a signifier. So let's say you open your eyes for a second and you receive all the information about the world. And in that second, you've not only received the light and transmitted the light, but you've stored the light in your head in some other format. And then you start piecing apart the process of what was here, what was there, what was this? Are there objects here that I recognize? Is there language involved? Is there color involved? Can I make any inferences about what was going on in the scene? And then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and you start looking for the deltas between those frames. And you start trying to figure out, is any of this changing? Is there some pattern? Is there some behavior? Is there some action? Is there some intent? And across frames, you start examining things. And all of those processes, those are cells in your head exchanging energy from one to another, executing processes that recursively go through and take a signal and signify it by something else. Two frames that we've stored in memory, full of objects and language and color, and things that you know about, and then comparing those to perceive some thread, some activity, some movement, some behavior, comparing to previous knowledge about what those things are. A whole bunch of compares happening, a whole bunch of signals and signifies, because what was previously two frames, you have now said, aha, this is, here's a man with his legs like this, and here's a man with his legs like this. He's walking, or he's running. So now those two frames have been signified by the concept of running. So you've converted from signifier to signified, or sorry, from signified to signifier, and you receive the message running. And so now you're at this incredibly high level of having perceived running. And that's the process of all these cells exchanging information about the light that you've received through your eyes, and just immense processing that you're not actively doing. It's intelligence. That's intelligence. And that intelligence is not you, right? Because you're not actively doing that. That's happening for you. The light being received and the objects occurring to you as you look at them, and the movement being perceived, and the threat that movement might pose if it's a threatening movement, or the delight that movement might pose if it's a humorous movement. That is intelligence. That is extreme intelligence, and it's not voluntary intelligence. It's not directed by you, whatever you are. But you get to the point where you perceive running, and now this sort of active participation begins, where why are they running? And sometimes that's an active participation thing, and sometimes it's a reactive participation thing. Oh, they're running because something's happening, I should run. Sometimes you just sort of execute a behavior. But where we spend our time consciously in the realm of the will is in dealing with things like meaning. What does that mean? Reflecting on stuff that happened. What does that mean? Putting ideas together that are somewhat abstract. What do these ideas have to do with each other? Is there some meaning here? And meaning is is the layer of thought, the layer of intelligence that we're actively working, and I think that's where we first come to self. You know, I am willfully moving pieces around in my head, and therefore I. Um, and also, you know, it's reinforced by you being able to see that you are corporeal. It's reinforced by other people referring to you in your corporeal form. Um, so, you know, if we're much more able, I think, to see others as individuals than we are to see ourselves as individuals naturally. If you see somebody walking, you're like, oh, that's Joe, much more than you are able to look around and just be like, oh, this makes sense. I'm me. Uh, I think that the I'm me comes after the that's Joe. I think it's a transitive thing. If that's one entity, then I must also be one entity. Um, and you're referred to as one entity, so it comes naturally. Uh, but it's interesting that these concepts that we come up with in the realm of meaning, one of them being self, the problem that the concept of self immediately presents is why? Or what does the self do? What is the self? What is the nature of self? And what does it do? What is it for? And that's a very, I think, religious question. You know, like what is a soul? Where does a soul go? What is the purpose of a soul? That kind of thing. Um, but I've already said it a couple times. Purpose. Purpose is an idea that we struggle with because it's not as easy to objectively determine, and it seems to always change. And we're trying to take meaning from all the events that we encounter and forge them together into some string of purpose. And the only reason that we do that is because it's demanded by the concept of self, that there is a concept of purpose. Because if a thing, then thing do, right? So what does thing do? What do I do? If I, what I do. So the concept of self demands purpose, and that imbalance of never actually being able to objectively state this is the purpose of self is what keeps us a little bit off balance and pushes us forward toward the future. We need to fill that void. The concept of self requires purpose. It's incomplete on its own. So that all that to share the uncomfortable notion that maybe not maybe not self, maybe neural activity, maybe intelligence, maybe processes, maybe energy being exchanged by cells. People talk about, well, I'm conscious, I'm observing all of this. Uh, I would argue that consciousness is like a song being played by an orchestra. All of the instruments are there and they're making a sound, and the song is beautiful and lasts for a time and does a whole bunch of amazing things. And then when it's done, what you have are the instruments. There are billions of trillions of instruments in your head participating in playing a song that is your consciousness. When they stop playing, there's not consciousness. But I think that does, you know, possibly the description of there being no observer in that process might be premature and a little bit nihilistic. You know, well, okay, but music has an audience, right? So whose job is it to stand in the seat, to sit in the seats and listen to the song? Interesting proposition, right? So maybe that might be a thought experiment, just to think, what are the instruments in my head that are playing the music to me, and what is the instrument, the cell or the part of me that's just listening? Is there such a thing? The weird divergence. So as of right now, so I had started a book. It's not Thinking Fast and Slow. That one's still at the library. Uh, I can't remember what it was. I started a book and only got a little ways into it. That was psychology, shape of the brain, incognito. It was called Incognito. Only got like 10 or 15 pages into that before I switched to Why Nations Fail. This is the one that I'm currently in. I'm only about halfway through. This was compelling given the current state of things. And this is where I snagged that concept of pluralism and its relative importance in the line of history, course of history. Prior to that, I don't remember when I was reading New Rules of War, but given, I'll decide later if I want to introduce work into this channel, but that seemed relevant. I read the book On Killing because I wanted to try to understand more about the lived experience of a soldier. That seemed incredibly relevant, and what I found was a lot. I found a lot. My life is fundamentally different from having read that book. It really promised in the beginning that it was going to go some places, and a couple of times along the way it delivered. Toward the end, you know, things got a little bit too immediate to the time in which the book was written. So I feel, you know, like it's sort of like as deep as it got at some point. The closer it got to the end, it was like, oh, okay, I'm coming back out now. This is now just a book. But there was some pretty intense stuff in there. And when you compare, it's all about macro and micro, right? So that's why I went into Incognito for a minute before deciding to come back out to this, was because I wasn't sure what direction I wanted to go exactly. The soldier is where the two meet. The soldier is where the extremes of lived experience meet the extremes of society. You know, the extremes of the lived experience of the individual meet the extremes of the wavering of our course of history. I decided to go more on the line of the course of history part to understand these large trends over time. But this book is much different after reading On Killing, because you understand the cost of each of these moments where we may have faltered or altered course. And that, again, is why I have come to really respect and revere ideas, because I have read, I haven't experienced, so, you know, again, a grain of salt, but I've read about not just the cost of dying, but the cost of killing. And it's a lot. It's a lot. It's surprisingly a lot. So where does that leave us? This is a video journal. This will be probably on a different account, because I will be doing a lot of it, and I don't want to take over this channel with it. This will be unpolished. This will be simply record of things that I'm thinking about and talking about on a given day. It will be an opportunity for me to process some of those things. It will be an opportunity to share where I'm at in my thinking. Maybe it'll serve some purpose for posterity, but mostly it is an attempt to not let any ideas fall through the cracks. I do have a couple of journals. I write in this one very rarely anymore. This is inherited the legacy of my journals from being a kid, where I would write about the day's events. I only do that between 1 and 5 times a year anymore, I guess. It's kind of sad. I think because I've gotten so used to filling a page or two, and I sometimes feel intimidated by you know, the thought that, oh boy, if I'm going to sit down and do something, then I'm going to have to follow the format of, making sure that it's a solid block of text. And so that can be kind of intimidating. Sometimes in recent history, it's just been a matter of, gosh, I don't really like how the world is right now. I will write when I'm feeling more chipper. I have a poetry book from when I was in early college, when I learned the lesson, or was supposed to have learned the lesson, that if you try to write about happy things and you start having unhappy circumstances, that you might find that you lose a lot of relatively happy thoughts on your way down. And then you write something here to say, like, gosh, I was afraid to break the silence because I thought that I would cause the pages pain with the words I was going to write, when actually only words colder still could take their place. So, fill in the gaps, right? Be honest. It's very difficult for somebody who admittedly has a bachelor's degree in communications, and specifically it was going to be like marketing and journalism communications, that, everything has to be part of your brand. Um, the brand that I'm expressing right now is not a winning one. You want to, if you want to be a brand, then you're going to have to suck up those bad days, and you're going to have to really fight hard for those good days so that you can tell people how great it is to be you. There is some value to living life that way, I think. No, there's not. No, there's not. You don't create value for yourself when you live that way. You create value for something else. When you do nothing but tell people how great it is to be you, you don't receive any of the value that you do create. The value that you create goes to the things that put you in that wonderful situation. It's a validation of the furniture you have, the type of house you live in, the cologne you use, the clothes you wear. It's a validation of the car you drive. It's a validation of the school you went to. It's a validation of everything around you that makes your life so wonderful. It's not a validation of you when you live your life as a brand. You should instead strive to be pathetic like me if you want to increase your lived experience in a meaningful way. So I was going to say this is an experiment in a different way of journaling. Caitlin got me a journal not long after we met that I don't fill as quickly as I would like to, but I seem to be filling it more than my other journals. It's a little less formal. Perhaps that's the real draw. I don't have to write about myself. I can write about anything. I can write about whatever the heck I'm thinking about, and it doesn't even have to be a certain font size. It doesn't have to. It can be a picture. So here's some thoughts on the different amount of information on different pages, different fonts on different pages. Some have drawings, all completely different subjects. Let me just go through this one. I was calling this my design journal for a long time because this was where I was keeping ideas that I had about games that I wanted to make. Board games or video games or anything like that. This is started around the time that I decided that what I was going to do with my life was follow Hideo Kojima and make video games, because for a couple of reasons. So I'm going to stop showing this now. Anyway, being a game designer is something that became very important to me about the time that I got this journal, and deciding that made a significant change in my life for the better. It was a good decision to make, to decide to be a game designer, even though it's not who I am and not who I intend to be. It was a good decision, and it was an all-consuming decision. At the time, if you would have asked me would it be okay if you weren't a game designer? I would say absolutely not. I'd rather jump off a cliff than not be a game designer. I'm going to be a game designer. And it took that energy and that commitment to move me forward and help me understand what was important in that statement. And what was important in that statement was that I observed from Hideo Kojima a couple of things. I observed autonomy, independence, authority, the ability to make a project and have it be something that you believed in and you could actually communicate a point. Uh, there was no creator like that I grew up with. Um, if you made movies, if you made television, if you made magazines, if you made comics, if you made anime, if you made any other type of like popular mass media, you were always subject to something else. You could never have control, total control, over your message. And maybe again, I overlooked books because if I had a choice, I would consume media in any other way. But again, books have can condense things in a certain way that a lot more thought goes into writing a book, I think, than goes into many other types of media. Um, Other types of media, it becomes the presentation that's important. More so than books, it becomes the amount of labor you put into actually understanding what it was that you're trying to say and evaluating its meaning. Um, so maybe an author of a book might have the level of control that I thought a game designer had, but a book doesn't give you the audience that a game does. A game gives you the control that being the author of a book does, with the reach that being the director of the film does. Oh my gosh, this is unlike anything. And there's some barriers to entry, but really the major barrier of entry is technical skill. So if I can get that technical skill, then I can tell an insanely immense number of people a very intentionally crafted message with no um, outside influence, beholden to no one. I don't have to compromise my message to fit some format of some screen. And that's what I got out of Kojima, and I was like, oh my god, this is so important. I need to do this right now. And it was the right decision, and it was the right reason to make the decision. I'm still working on it. You know what? Now that I think about it, maybe that still might be the most influential way to affect the world, is to be one of the idea people, right? One of the people with a message, one of the people with something to say, who can reach a platform uh, and cause people to think. It certainly affected me, and set me on a path that might ultimately be one of technological innovation, or might be one of mass media communication and messaging, or might be one of influencing institutions that that affect the world. We'll see. I don't know yet. It's all very exciting. And I'm very tired. I've been talking for 53.5 minutes. Talking is something that I can do, regardless of whether it's of anything of meaning for anyone, or anybody wants to hear me, or I even want to talk. It's been a wonderful hour now. It's been a lot of fun talking to no one in particular. It's especially been nice that I can get some of these thoughts out. I feel very sorry for anybody who decides that they want to watch this. Even on 2 times speed, that's a half hour. Oh my gosh. I will never, ever in my life watch this thing start to finish again, even though it's the first of what I propose to be a long series of things. Um, for students who feel like if there was something in here of value at some point, for a student to have to go through and, oh my gosh, listen to this guy for for an hour. Maybe at that point, if this actually is something of consequence, they will have come up with a 3 times speed, or like a split screen where you can like watch 4 versions of me talking that are 15 minutes each simultaneously, and like somehow that works, and you can, if I say something important at some point, you can just transition all your attention to that. Yeah, what an awful, awful thing to have to consume. However, I think I've said this before about a video where I was eating cheese, and I did go back and watch that video, and that's probably kind of sad to admit, right? Um, so who knows? Who knows? Hi, future me. Why are you wasting your time? Say everything the first time is legitimate. I'm documenting my thoughts. These are things that I'm actually going through at the moment. I'm studying some concepts, but you know this already. You don't need to be here. All right. With that, I think I'm going to end it. Journaling, books, work, society, world falling apart. Let's get some more voices out there, and let's have people not presenting everything that they know as fact. Let's have people picking apart what people. Obviously, I'm an easy target, right? I've said a whole bunch of nonsense. Pick it apart, tear it apart, break me down. Take the parts that you like, put it together with what you are, and let it be you. Take the parts you don't like, throw them in the garbage, man. Like, I'm here to be consumed. Whatever you think is right. Differences of opinion, differences in belief, differences in expression, innovation, breaking up established patterns. That's it. That's enough for now. I'm gonna go. Good night, everybody, and I wish you the best of luck out there.